session. And today I've got Maddock here, who is an entrepreneur, inventor, writer, and keynote speaker. He's the CEO and founding partner of Maddock Douglas, an internationally recognized innovation consultancy firm that has worked with more than 25% of the Fortune 100 to design and launch new products, services, and experiences along with business models. As serial entrepreneur, Mike has founded 6 successful businesses. Mike's fun and interactive when we have a keynote presentation conversation. I'm looking forward to that. And you've also been a long-time Forbes contributor and co-author of 4 books, Free the Idea Monkey, Brand New, Flirting with the Uninterested, and your latest book, Plan D. Mike, welcome to the show. I'm so grateful that you're here. Mate, what an achievement. 4
Thanks,
books.
Barry. 4 books. Writing a book is kind of like eating a side of beef. You do it one bite at a time. So I started writing. It's as therapy more than anything else. And then books came out. So it's fun to write books. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Mate, I'm super excited to pick your brain. I want to welcome everyone who's joining us live, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, Facebook right now. Rafi from my team is across all the different social channels. He's going to feed through any questions you've got for us. So please, throughout tonight's episode or today's episode, keep the questions coming so Mike and myself can get them answered. Hit the like button. Let us know that you're watching. But Mike, you've been fortunate enough to be in the room with some of the craziest of crazies in the world. And I say that with love, but I mean entrepreneurs, disruptors, people that are doing things differently. And your latest book has really, I guess, from my understanding, been a culmination of what you've noticed being in the rooms with these people that are creating these left brain ideas out of somewhat nowhere. Talk to me, like, how did you kind of find yourself being where you are right now?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I'm a creative. It's the typical entrepreneur story. I was never much of a student, very curious kid, always trying to figure things out. Luckily, I came up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. And for me, having a couple of coins in my pocket meant freedom. So I started to work. I started my own little businesses. And I worked just serendipitously for a whole bunch of entrepreneurs. And what I got to see was that they made a lot of mistakes. I'll never forget, I was a laborer on a construction crew in high school and college. It was one of the jobs I had. And I was working in this very, very expensive high rise in Chicago, where every floor was a custom home, basically. And so they had the best tradesmen in the city working on these custom homes. And I would hear this swearing, and I'd look around, and this carpenter had just screwed up this beautiful piece of board. He'd cut it wrong. He'd be throwing it around and swearing. And that was a big lesson for me, because it's messy, and people make mistakes. So I think a lot of people are afraid to jump into the deep end of the pool because they can't swim. What I see is that entrepreneurs jump in and they just figure it out. So at some point right out of school, I got a job for an entrepreneur, and I met my wife, and I didn't like the way he was treating people. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to hang a shingle. And that's how I started.
Wow. So what was your first business then?
The design, marketing communications firm. My first real business was I did advertising and marketing for people. So,
excellent, amazing. So Plan D, like, what are the kind of fundamental principles behind Plan D? So Plan D is all around like the disruption of entrepreneurship. Yeah. Yeah,
it's so my primary business is a consulting firm that helps companies. We were talking about this earlier, pivot, profit, or punt. Most of our clients have one or two things happening. Either the world has sent them signals that what they used to sell won't sell anymore. Something's changed dramatically. Or there's just a courageous leader that says, you know what? I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to blow shit up for the good of the whole. And so I've been fortunate to be in the room with those people. And I started taking notes about what they had in common, what their superhero powers were, and came up with a dozen or so superhero powers. So a couple, they find a yin for their yang. So wherever there's a great Walt Disney, there's a great Roy Disney. Yeah. And you've got this visionary. Everybody thinks that the visionary leader is what changes the world. I don't agree. I actually think it's the operator who sees the vision and tries to figure out how to put that on the ground. And you see these partnerships that are working really well or they're not. The challenge is that under pressure, those two types of personalities go in the exact opposite way. So finding systems and processes to keep those two people or those types of people working and pulling in the same direction is really hard. So that's one of my favorites. Abundant mindset is another one. Some people see problems, other people see possibilities. This is a really difficult time to be in business. Are you grateful for it or are you persecuted by it? That's a really important question right now.
Yeah, it is. I want to dive into both those because I think there's a huge amount of value for our listeners as well. Let's go into first like this dynamic between visionary and what I'd call like integrator. They talk a lot about that in the book Rocket Fuel from the EOS methodology.
Right.
And what most people see, the public sees, is the visionary. They see the Steve Jobs and they see the Elon Musks and they see these people at the front line, the crazies that are creating something new or something different and disrupting the status quo. But I tend to agree as well. Like good integrators are harder to find than visionaries. Someone that has the ability to communicate and take the big picture, the ambiguous idea and bring it down into a plan, into a strategy, into a workable model that can be executed amongst team. Talk to me like, what are some of the things that I guess entrepreneurs should look to put in place to be able to have that communication rhythm, and why is it important?
Well, so first of all, thank you. So companies become a reflection of the leader. And so what happens is we tend to hire people that look like us, think like us, and we don't do it on purpose. You wake up one day, and I had this experience, where I'm a big fan of the Kolbe test, which, there's all kinds of different tests but I love Kolbe because your Kolbe score doesn't change after the third grade. I mean, and when you're in flow, that's what your Kolbe score shows. So it's critically important to know what your leadership team looks like. And I remember we had our team tested and not everybody, most of them had a Kolbe score just like mine, which explained a lot. We were so good at coming up with the next idea and the next idea and the next idea. And, every meeting, you talk about EOS, we get together, I'm like, well, did you execute? Well, no, kind of, but I've got this other idea. And that was the pattern. Now, on the flip side of that, if you're an operator, I love telling the story. I was on the General Electric Innovation Advisory Board. And General Electric was started by Thomas Edison, who is one of the greatest inventors in history. And I remember going to 30 Rock down in New York, going all the way to the top floor, getting out, walking down this long hallway full of black and white pictures of middle-aged white guys who'd been on the board. And one of the advisors whispered in my ear, he goes, "You know why we're here, right?" And I said, "I think so." He goes, "Do you know it's been 13 years since General Electric has launched a new product or service or business model based on one of their patents? 13 years. I'm like, really? And that's stunning to me because this is Thomas Edison's company. But you know what? Man, could they Six Sigma? Man, could they mitigate risk? Jack Welch came in there and did such a good job of making every step perfect that they forgot how to fail. And that's what happens on the other side of that, when the operator manifests his or her own personality throughout an organization. And so there's, the book I wrote just before this is called Free the Idea Monkey. I call them idea monkeys and ringleaders. You call them visionaries and integrators. I call them idea monkeys and ringleaders. There are these processes where recognizing your strengths and falling into, are you a divergent thinker or a convergent thinker? And the idea is to set people up with processes that make them feel strong and make them do the right thing. So for example, one small example, companies that are great at innovation are not great at ideas. Ideas are dangerous. Companies that are good at innovation are great at insights. They're really good at understanding needs. So the operators in those companies know how to find a target, size a target, frame a target, and then say, hey, idea monkeys, come in here. This is what we need to solve. And so now everyone in the company is laser focused on solving a specific problem that is meaningful, big enough for us to care about, really clear. It matters to our consumers or our customers. But most people fall in love with ideas, and ideas are super dangerous, because if you ask your company for ideas, you're going to get them. You're going to get hundreds of ideas, and they're going to be all over the place, and people will be demystified very quickly because you didn't use their big idea. So that's an example of insights matter more than ideas, and they're the targets that make integrators and visionaries, or idea monkeys and ringleaders, work together well.
Mm. Can you define like the separation or the differentiation between innovation and idea then? Because I've never heard that concept before.
Yeah, for sure. So if you, since I'm a consultant, I'll just speak in a Venn diagram. So just imagine 3 circles.
Yeah.
3 circles. Innovation is the synchronized intersection. That means that we need to make these 3 circles ram together of an insight, a target, a problem worthy of solving first, then and only then an idea that solves that problem, and finally an experience that makes people say, oh my God, you listened to me and I'll pay you this much for it. And so most people jump right to ideas. I already told you ideas are dangerous. There are, literally billions of dollars have been lost because people got really excited about an idea that it was an idea with looking for a problem to solve. So when I talk to young investors, or I'm really curious about, so what is the problem you're solving that people are desperate to solve? That is also another one of the things that disruptors do. I call it embracing the hate to innovate. And you see this. Most really successful entrepreneurs see something that drives them so crazy, they just hate it, that they can't find a solution for it, and everybody else hates it too. Why isn't anybody doing something about this? So they do it. And typically the industry is saying you can't do that, but because it's a sacred cow or whatever, but they do it. So
yeah, reminds me, I had an earlier episode, probably a couple of months back, with Ray Blakely. He said there's 2 types of entrepreneurs. There's ones that create something from nothing, right? Think about Henry Ford. It's like, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right? So he created something from nothing. But he said then there's the other entrepreneur where they have a problem and they're like, a solution doesn't exist for this. I'll just create one myself, and his example was when he wanted to go on people's podcasts, there was no directory for podcasts to understand what podcasts, who's the audience, who runs, and what's their contact information. So he made the Google of podcast directory systems per se. But what you've just shared, to me, it sounds like an actual strategy, like a proven strategy or blueprint to innovation.
That's it. It is. Yeah, I think that, yes, go ahead.
No, sorry, you go.
Well, I think it is, because once you have identified a gap in experience, a gap in product, a gap in service, whatever, and you've clearly identified it, and it's formulaic. There's a formula for it. Now you can decide. You can decide whether you can use something you've done in the past and improve it. You can go and buy a company that is some technology that solves it. You can invent something out of thin air, but it's really about the what are we trying to do here? And I think, it's when you're a one-man show, or there's no risk, but when you have hundreds or thousands of employees, you just can't roll the dice with ideas. You have to, focus on 2 or 3 things that are worthy of your time. So Yeah. And there are definitely people that are more gifted at thinking laterally than others.
Yeah.
Those are my people, you know,
Yeah.
that can jump around and make connections.
Yeah, I love that. There's a few questions coming in. If you're watching live tonight or today, please keep the questions coming. I'll get to those in a second. The question I've got, though, is did you guys end the 13-year dry streak for GE? Did you guys come up with a new product?
I'm sorry. For GE, I'm sorry. Yeah, we did. We helped them come up with some new products and services, and it's incredibly difficult. We worked with their healthcare group, for example, and helped them launch some new ways to monitor folks that are aging in place. You know, the challenge of should mom live at home or should we put her in a home was a really meaty challenge that had more to do with behavior and perception than technology. I will say though that the biggest challenge for anybody who's been doing anything for more than a couple of months is that you become an expert, and that expertise is your biggest strength and your biggest weakness. I like to say you can't read the label when you're sitting inside the jar. That means you know what works, you know how you get paid, you know how you make money, you know what the boss wants, you know what you can afford, you know what's legal, you know why Harry got fired, you know what you've tried in the past, you know. And the more you know, the harder it is to see possibility when it's right in front of you. So a large organization, any large organization that has been incredibly successful making money a certain way is an expert at that. And so, said differently, it's perfectly engineered to kill any idea that threatens its legacy products or services. And that's why it's so cool to be an entrepreneur, because you have the ability to start over. Like, one of the great questions is, if you had to start your business over today, how would you build it?
Yeah.
And, you know, when you have tens or dozens or hundreds or thousands of employees, well, I'd have to fire this guy. I have all you just can't do it. It's so hard. Yeah. So that's why we need entrepreneurs.
It's the paradox of entrepreneurship, though. You know, it's like everything. I feel that everything that we need to do and put into place to start a business from scratch and grow it to its first $1 million is almost the complete opposite of what we need to put in place to grow it to 10 million. You know, and so as an entrepreneur, it's like every day, every week, we need to reinvent ourselves in one way or another to be constantly pushing the status quo.
I think that is so astute. My own personal experience has been, I tell people I'm a really good starter. I'm a really bad finisher. And you said earlier I'd started 6 businesses. I have, you know, and it's like you bump your head $1 million, $3 million, $8 million, $15 million, and something happens. And so, you know, they say the worst athlete makes the best coach. You know, a lot of the work that I'm doing, it has to do with my own failure. I mean, it's humbling how much I've screwed up. I mean, it really is. And I'm actually starting a new company around this idea right now. I haven't even mentioned it publicly. This is the first time, but the whole idea is what would happen if you had a forum that was balanced. That's the concept. It was engineered to give you the the financier, the orchestrator, the rainmaker, the strategist, the visionary, the operator. So if that group was looking at the issues you had and strength testing the solutions real time, I think that would create what is necessary to break through that, $5 million ceiling. Because how many businesses do you know that get to like 2, 3, 4, 5 million, and that's it? They're great businesses. But there's this vortex of behavior that keeps them from rising.
Yeah. Which is why so many companies like change over leadership as well, to bring in fresh ideas and new energy and to see things differently. And You know, like my belief is the business is plateaued. Like it's just simply a question unasked, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Or it's been asked 100 times and the person who's leading the company just doesn't hear it or hears it the wrong way. I mean, in my own experience, I don't think that I, I tell you that I've had people say, dude, you know, come on. And I think there's also the overcorrection where you want to fix it, so you overdo it and you go for the exact opposite of you. And then culturally that doesn't work either.
Yeah.
So it's all about balance.
Yeah. I love that. Love that. Enjoying the conversation so far. Got some questions here. If you're watching live, welcome. Hit the like button. Let us know that you're watching, and then please post any questions that you have for myself and Mike, so we can get them answered. Jim from Florida. Welcome to the show, Jim. Could Mike talk about some real life examples of construction companies in the US that have suffered from COVID but reinvented themselves for the better? Have you any examples of any construction companies?
Well, so we did some work for a company called Case New Holland about, call it a decade ago. And I remember when they hired us, they said, hey, we need some help with our parts and services, you know, because we have all these tractors, cranes, farm implements, et cetera, that are, you know, they were a roll up of, their number one competitor was John Deere. So they're competing with a 100-year-old company that's been one company. Case New Holland, I believe at the time, was 5 companies all glommed together. So they had issues. And we went out and interviewed all of their customers' customers. So when you think about, we go from B2B to B2C to B2Me. I think we're all in the B2Me business because people, we're dealing with consumers. So we went and talked to those folks. And anyway, they weren't in the farm business. They were in the efficiency business. That was the big breakthrough. Like, and so then because no one ever thought about them. It's like the IT guy. You never think about him until something breaks, right? It's the most thankless job. So all their customers cared about was keep my stuff working because I gotta make money. And if something breaks and I can't get it fixed, I'm out, you know. So at the end of the day, what we did was we helped them launch satellite-driven software. I mean, it was like we came up with the making them more efficient was about GPS helping drive tractors and farm implements. And I mean, it was incredible, but it all came from this insight that you're in the efficiency business. So the question that I would ask is, and I think the most important question when you're trying to pivot, profit, or punt is what business are we really in?
Yeah. What
business do we have the right to be in? So when I hear someone say someone in the construction business, really? I mean, that feels like a category, not a business. And, you know, so the answer to that question lies in somewhere you have unique skills and a reputation. There's a growing and lucrative market out there, a gap that you can fill. You have assets and systems, you have talent and staff, you have passions and core values, you have a network. Right in the middle of all those things is the answer to what business you're really in. So earlier today, you were talking about Ford Motor. I think it was before we even got on, have a complete reinvention. Ford realized that he was in the transportation business, not the buggy business.
Yeah.
So his competitors were saying, I need to make a faster buggy or a better buggy. And he said, well, wait a minute. People want to go from point A to point B. How can we transport them more quickly? And if you think about the greatest businesses in the world, it's really hard to answer the question, what business is Google in? What business is Apple in?
Mm-hmm.
Apple's not in the computer business. So being really clear about when you ask that question, you're going to be able to see opportunities in the market to serve a need that is being unmet that you have the right to serve. And yeah. So that got me on my soapbox. Thank you. It's a great question.
A fantastic question, Jim. Thanks so much for asking that. I'm not sure what's like in the States, but I guess to bring it back down as well, like in Australia, I spoke to a lot of traders, and we coach a lot of traders that are just flat out, they can't keep up because people have been locked in their homes and they're looking at, they're sick of staring at the same wall. They're like, oh, what if we put a window there and move the door over there? And there's a lot of renovations that are happening right now as well. Another question here from Keith from New South Wales in Australia. Could Mike give some broad strokes of what's ahead for the US economy and the world in the context of this pandemic? Specifically, for example, what are your thoughts on the possible what are your thoughts on a possible vaccine?
Dystopian.
We're opening up Pandora's box here, Mike.
Well, I'm not there's far smarter people than me to talk about the future. I will say that I think it's critically important right about now that leaders confront the brutal facts. I think are you familiar with the Stockdale paradox, Barry?
No.
So Admiral Stockdale was a Vietnam prisoner of war, and someone asked him the question, why did some people survive and why did some not survive? And he said, I know the answer to that. He said that the people that told themselves that it was almost over, like, we'll be free by Christmas, we'll be free by Thanksgiving.
Man's Search for Meaning.
Pardon me?
The Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah, this was actually, I think I first read about it in, is that Viktor Frankl?
Yeah.
I read about it in Jim Collins' book. But anyway,
yeah.
they die of a broken heart, basically, because they had told themselves the story that it was almost over, the vaccine is coming. Whereas the people that were able to confront the brutal facts, that this might go on for a whole long time, actually were the ones who got through it. I think leaders right now need to be eyes wide open about, hey, this is what's really going on. And, so we have to deal with what's really going on. And I'm concerned, being here in the States, that there's a little bit of Stockdale paradoxing going on, where we could get to January and our country has a broken heart, because that doesn't actually happen. I think we need to be a little bit more clear-minded about the possibility that this is, the truth. What's going on? Let's deal with the truth. And that's, I will tell you that in business right now, one of my businesses is really having a hard time, and it's sort of liberating talking about, like, here's what's going on, man. Here it is, open kimono. What do you guys want to do about it? And I've been surprised actually by how people respond to it. It brings people closer together. It doesn't scare them off.
I absolutely love what you've just shared there, a lot that you've brought onto that as well. And I think you're so right. And we've seen it here in Australia, like the eastern states have just gone back down to lockdown for a 6-week stint. And, I've got staff that are over there, and I know people over there that are just broken. Like the first time they got through it okay. And it's like, all of a sudden this shining light came through, and then bang, they got smacked back down. And I think that there's a really good point that you raise, is that, we could live for a new tomorrow or another tomorrow, or we could be present in the moment right now. And I think, over the last 6 months, I've noticed people that have done the best have been people that have been able to look at both sides of the coin, because I believe that we can't get rich collecting one-sided coins. You need to look at both sides and go, okay, this stuff is happening right now. It's serious. There's all this that's out of our control. And there's all this opportunity. There's all this amazing stuff happening over here. And once we see both parts, then we can make a more strategic decision of how we choose to show up. But I see so many people that are like, spiritual bypassing. It's like, oh, there's opportunities and everything's rainbows and fairy floss, and the world's going through a massive, uplift and a spiritual awakening, and completely like absent-minded of this shit over here. But there's also people that are just so stuck in doom and gloom. It's like, oh my God, the world's falling apart. Bring on the vaccine, economy's going down. Like, I think you've got to look at both sides, and only then can you make a conscious choice of how you're choosing to show up and the perception that you choose to take on board.
Yeah, there's the I have a mentor who used to like to say, like, so when you asked me earlier today, how am I doing? My answer is always something like, I'm living the dream. Because I am, there are all kinds of dreams, but it's a reminder to me that there's lots of possibility every day. So I want to hear myself say it. Bert Jacobs, I don't know if you're familiar with the Life is Good company. All my t-shirts say life is good. I mean, I just want constant reminders to be grateful. I think so a mentor of mine would just say fascinating, when something bad happened. Because it was to, instead of getting furious, he wanted to be curious. Like, what is here for me? What is the lesson? How is this going to make me better? And I think there's something about making pain. So one of Rick Voren is the CEO of Stagen, which is an integral leadership program here in the States. And this guy is the closest thing to Yoda I know. He's just an amazing guy. And he heard me one day complaining about something, which I like to think I don't do, but I do. And he said, he puts on his Yoda voice and he's like, Mike, I hear you complaining. In my experience, leaders like you only change for one of two reasons. Either you've suffered to the point where you can't possibly suffer anymore, so you're going to change something, or you have a vision of the future that is so compelling that nothing is going to keep you from reaching for it. So I guess I have a question for you. Have you suffered enough, or do you have a vision? Because unless you can answer yes to one of those two questions, you're just going to keep complaining. And that kind of stopped me. So when I hear or feel myself complaining, because the thing about suffering is you tamp it down until the pain goes away. By how? You drink, you work out, you distract yourself, you do something so that it just kind of numbs. But then and maybe it's a month later, there it is again. It's a bad cycle. But if you have a vision for something, well, now you're going forward. And whatever comes at you is like, okay, but how's that affecting my vision? What am I doing? Where am I going? And so that there's a subtle difference I've found between the vision of ending suffering and the vision of, I got to get there. I got to go out there. And so that's something I'm thinking a lot about. The language I'm using, what's my vision? Where am I going? And it's just so much more fun to be generative moving forward than wallowing in all the stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah. And it's not that you're not dealing with what's at hand. You're just choosing the meaning you're applying to it. It's like, nothing has meaning other than the meaning we give it. And, right now there is a lot that's out of control of you or I, and many of us. There's many things that are completely out of our control. Yet there is things we can control, and we can control the decisions we make. We can choose and control how we show up to certain situations, how we process things. And I love that bit of advice from Yoda there. Fantastic. Another question here from George from Perth. Could Mike talk about one or two companies that has the greatest culture that you admire the most?
So I have a friend, I wrote about her in Plan D, Christina Harbridge. She had a company. Her dad got really sick. Bob got sick. He had Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. I can't recall which one. But either way, she was in college and she had to go get a job to pay for his medical care. And she switched degrees. I mean, she did everything she could to free up mind space. And she took a job in a collections agency. She thought it was an antique company and she loved antiques, but it wasn't. It was bill collections.
Collection.
And she sat in this company. She worked there for, about 6 months, I believe. And she saw these nice people basically yelling and torturing and like it was bad. And one day, she heard someone scream, "He's got a gun, he's got a gun." And she peeked out of her cubicle and saw all kinds of people running by her. And so she jumped out and instinctively walked towards the danger. Her dad always said, approach danger. He was a political activist. He was talking about dogs, but whatever. And she gets to the lobby and there's some guy and he's screaming, "You ruined my life, you ruined my family, I'm going to shoot you and I'm going to kill myself." And she walked up to him and said, "You don't want to do this. We're not worth this. You owe us some money and you're gonna wind up in jail, or we're not worth it." He goes, "Yeah, you know what? You're not worth it." And he reached into his pocket, and she thought he was reaching for a gun, and he pulled out a checkbook, wrote a checkbook, and walked out. And so did she. And she started a company, and her vision was to be the nicest company in the world, but it was a collections company.
Wow.
And she started measuring things like thank you letters and invitations to weddings and jobs that they got people that they were collecting from. And her results were 3x what everybody else was doing. And then Walmart and Target called and said, "What are you doing? People are calling, thanking us for." And so there's an example of a company. She sold the company, but that's the example of a story that lights me up, because it's completely taking a bad industry and going, what if I took the worst part of this industry and made it sweet and special.
Amazing. So, that's fantastic. Great question, George. An awesome story there, Mike. Mate, for those that maybe want to connect with you and find a bit more about some of the cool stuff that you do, maybe even purchase your books, what's the best way for our viewers to find you?
So I have a website. I do a little bit of speaking and writing. Mike at Maddock, Mike-Maddock.com is the website. If you're a company that's trying to figure out what business you should be in next, Maddock Douglas is my company. www.maddockdouglas.com is the company. And I'm happy to talk to anyone I can help. You know, the world is small and the challenge is large. Yeah. Let's do this.
And I think there's never been a greater time than right now for collaboration and community. You know, I think right now that the only way through is for us to unite as leaders and to collaborate more and to build a greater community to serve. And I honestly believe too that as entrepreneurs are going to pull the world out of the shit that we're in right now. Not the political parties, not our governments. It's going to be us uniting as business leaders.
I think you're right. Yeah. I hope you're right. So
yeah. Well, look,
thank you for the work you do, Barry. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, you too. Mate, this has been amazing. Like I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Could absolutely chat all evening. We are just about out of time. Ruffy's going to put the links in to connect with you in the chat there. So if anyone watching, please reach out and take Mike up on his offer to connect in. Thank you all for watching and your questions from everywhere in the world. Mike, man, just appreciate you. Just appreciate having you on the show. Yeah, humbled and grateful to have you here. And guys, keep in touch. Make sure you subscribe to the Game Changers Facebook channel to stay up to date with all the Freedom Series interviews like this. Mike, thanks for your time, dude.
A great pleasure. Thank you.